My name is Dr. Liz Burton-Crow, and I'm the Director of Education for the Carrillo Center for Nonviolence. Welcome back to Living One. It's been more than a year since we first launched Living One, our monthly webinar series where presenters from around the world share their vision of a future in which all animals are treated with respect and dignity. A lot's changed since we first began these important conversations. Given all that's currently unfolding in the world, today there is no denying that animal wellness and self-determination are linked to our own well-being. We speak these days of getting back to normal, which begs a larger question. What do we want that new normal to look like, and how do we get there? This month, we welcome Gwenna Hunter, founder of VegansOfLA and Vegans for Black Lives Matter. She is also the vegan food aid coordinator at Vegan Outreach for the greater Los Angeles area, where her team provides fresh produce and hot plant-based meals as a form of support to local POC-led organizations. Gwenna enjoys helping facilitate the food empowerment of local communities and following a vegan lifestyle. Gwenna became vegetarian in 2008, and in 2016, she went from vegetarian to vegan after watching the video Dairy is Scary and having a supernatural experience with a cow. Gwenna is also one of the co-authors of the book Voices for Animal Liberation, Inspirational Accounts by Animal Rights Activists by Brittany Michelson. In 2021, Gwenna will be introducing a Vegans for Black Lives Matter podcast. And interviewing Gwenna today is our very own Dr. Gabe Bradshaw.
Well, welcome everyone, and Gwenna, it's a thrill to have you here. You're hailing from LA, from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Before we get into these tantalizing, like your cow journey, etc., I was just really impressed in terms of reading about Vegans for LA, where you talk about. I'm just quoting from your Facebook that. Mm-hmm. That redefining the word vegan to mean respect, compassion, peace, abundance, and liberation, oppression, and the cessation of oppression and harm for all sentient beings. We heal with love. I was really impressed with that, just specifically because the term vegan still carries a charge with it. And I really appreciated you basically deconstructing it and bringing it out of this label into a way of being and feeling and really a new ontology, a new way of understanding our existence.
Yeah, absolutely. Because so often in the conversation for liberation in this movement, when I first became vegan and started doing actions, I was experimenting with so many different things, speak outs, protests, all types of things just to figure out what felt right for me. And I would notice when I would have a conversation about some other form of injustice, it would just be like silence. And it would be so strange to me because it felt almost like taboo to have these type of conversations around other compassionate individuals, because my thought is if you get it on the level of animals, then of course you get it on the whole level of humans and the planet and everything. But I found that it would usually be a very hard stop with the animals. And I would find having these conversations, going out marching and protesting for the animals, but then also feeling sad inside that the people that I'm walking with and helping liberate animals don't want to have a conversation with me about police brutality or what's going on in the Black community. So it was very disheartening. And so it's like, I can't do one and not do the other. I don't have that luxury to just speak up for the animals. I'm inside of a body that needs to be spoken up for as well. So it's been, I've had a very love-hate relationship with this movement since I began. But I'm starting to, things are starting to shift a little bit, and people are starting to come around and taking responsibility for learning about what's going on in this reality. A lot of people have been living their lives in a linear way to where they're saying, "Oh, I didn't even know," and I get it, But it's like it's strange to see that people are functioning on a daily basis, go to work, get up, have these lives, and can totally ignore or not even realize what's happening and with other human beings. So I'm still working through that process of accepting that as what's been norm for most people. But I am proud that a lot of people are coming around.
Mm-hmm. Well, it really struck me because just even, for example, in my own, mini journey, I remember, a Danish grandmother, and the whole thing was cooking. And I, I remember when I was, becoming plant-based, I had this sort of emotional crisis of like culture versus nature, and feeling like I was, betraying my heritage and, which was more than, well, when I say more than food, that's a kind of a very privileged way of saying, I mean, food, that's a whole topic. I mean, it is the topic, what does food mean? I mean, in the sense of this, there's so much that's infused in the topic of food. And so I realized though, at one point, and I was actually talking to my mother and she, well, sweetie, they're not really conflicted. I mean, she was not vegan, but there isn't a conflict. And that was something, that I went through in my own experience in that way. And I think what you're talking about is so powerful because it really is moving us experientially from this paradigm of oppressive dualism and the reductionism and the dominant society of insisting on that kind of identity, imposing an identity. In fact, I was working with a woman, who's working with trauma-related homelessness in women, and it's that notion of that the belonging, the stigmatism of being homeless, right, is stealing away the sense of belonging, stealing the sense of self and replacing that with belonging into a category which is just re-traumatizing and it's further oppressing in that way. So I think that what you're doing, by bringing these things together and being articulated and really redefining what veganism is really powerful. And I was listening to the video of the Wu-Tang Clan. What was his name? I've forgotten his name. The
RZA from Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah, that was very powerful. I mean, one, his rap, but and I encourage people to listen to it. But I felt like that also was a very powerful statement talking about that soul food.
That one
is, soul food is is really just slave man's food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's at one point we didn't really have an option, but there's no excuse for that now. Mm-hmm. But that just goes to show, like, too, the programming on this planet, because you're born into this, and from the time you leave your mother's womb, they want to stick formula in your mouth versus a breast. And you go to school, and milk does a body good. Drink milk for strong, healthy mm-hmm. bones. You need meat for protein. They show pigs, pictures of pigs being happy, and here's, bacon, this, that, and the other, and a cow being happy, being mooed and milked. And so the programming that these foods are acceptable, and that these type of foods are, they sustain your life, mm-hmm. and that they are life source giving, it's a program, because there's certain foods like chitlins, that's a staple in some Black households, which is the epitome, in my opinion, of slave food. And that's, the intestines of a pig. Mm. Okay. Yeah, at one point that's all we had, but who would still choose to eat that? So it's to me, like, when people talk about going vegan, and especially one thing that I found that's kind of insulting that I've found recently that happens a lot in the mostly in the white vegan culture, is people will say, especially for like Black Lives Matter, how is it that oppressed people can still eat animals? If you're oppressed, you should no longer be oppressing. And they think that it's an automatic light bulb, but it's really it's an awakening and a transformation of the mind, and also deprogramming. So that doesn't happen overnight. Just because you recognize your own oppression doesn't mean that you automatically have now taken this pill and you're aware of all oppressions. Just like you being a vegan doesn't mean that you're no longer oppressing. Vegans are still, everybody's still oppressing on some certain level. If you're on this planet, you're making income, somebody is suffering in order for you to make money and for there to be some form of profit. So we in the movement, we still have this really toxic culture of thinking that, you know, as vegans, we're supreme, and we no longer participate in suffering and oppression, when actually we still do. We've just awakened to a certain form of it, but you're still doing it. But my whole point in saying that is, in a lot of communities, especially like, you know, lower income communities, they're not having conversations about eating plant-based. Mm-hmm. You know, what's on the table is what's on the table. Mm-hmm. They're trying to figure out how to make their next dollar, how to make ends meet, how to do other things. So it's not that simple of a light switch for a lot of people. It wasn't that simple for me. And I was surrounded, when I came to LA, I became surrounded by people that were vegan, and I still wasn't getting the message. And it took a dream, supernatural experience, a video, then I finally got the message. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. I can go off on so many tangents, so you got to stop me.
Well, keep going. Since you brought up the video and then your mystical experience, can you talk a little, share about that?
Yeah. So I had a very supernatural experience. I was still vegetarian. I was vegetarian. Maybe was I kind of pescatarian, but definitely vegetarian. And none of this was really for animals or anything other than just a health benefit for me to abstain from eating animals. But I knew it was something weird when I got into being vegetarian. It was almost like I knew this was leading me to something, but I didn't know what. But anyhow, one day I have a dream, and in the dream, I'm flying in the sky, as we do in dreams. And I look down and I see this really beautiful green pasture, and I see a cow, and she looks up at me. And when she looks up at me, our eyes lock. And when we locked, we merged and became one. And I was the cow. I was her. And I experienced memories, feelings, emotions, love, pain, birth, love of children. I felt everything. And when I came out of the dream, I was like so incredibly emotional. I was just crying so hard because I'm like, you know, I've always been someone that has been like a truth seeker, always trying to make it to the next level. It's like I never think I have it all figured out, even though there was one time I thought I had it figured out. But I've learned the levels will just never stop. And so I've always tried to like keep going to different levels and keep learning. But in all my years of doing that, I never once considered that, you know, a cow loves. And so that like was an awakening that like blew my mind wide open. I'm like, oh my God, they love their children. They're connected to each other. They think, because I, like a lot of people do, just assume that they're just these pieces of meat on four legs, aimlessly wandering without a thought, which makes no sense, but it's not something I ever had to contemplate or was confronted with about contemplating. And so I was really emotional and just really crying. And I'm like, oh my God, they love and we eat them. Now, even though I wasn't eating cows, I didn't mind if other people did. So if you want to, you know, eat a steak or eat this, that's on you. I just don't eat it because my body doesn't take it well, but I had no problem with anyone else doing it. And so I was just crying. And then, you know, then I'm like questioning my sanity. I'm like, maybe I watched a movie or something? Like I started questioning it. And I'm like literally in bed, and all of a sudden, and this is me being wide awake, not asleep anymore, I'm wide awake, I felt a very warm sensation over my chest, like over my heart. And I touched it. And when I touched it, I was like paralyzed with the most profound sense of peace. Like I felt it was absent of all worry, concern, fear. It felt so peaceful. I feel like I could have lived in it and bathed in it the rest of my life. And it felt like it was like healing me. And it just lasted a few seconds. And I felt like that was my confirmation that the experience was real. What I experienced was real. And I also think like the cow gave me a little piece of her heart. Like she shared with me, like, you know, what you experienced was real. And here, take some of this with you. And so after that, I was just like, wow, people are eating them and they're conscious and they feel and they're just like us. But I was still consuming dairy. I still had not, this is how I tell you the programming is tough, because even with that, it didn't unlock the cruelty to dairy, because I still was under the impression that, you know, someone in their blue jean overall sat down on a stoop, milked the cow, and she said moo, and it was consensual. And then I would say probably within a few weeks, I came across the video, Dairy is Effing Scary. And when I saw that, I was like, I'm vegan for life. I'm like, I am done. I like to know that she's aware of her own faculties, just like myself, and what we're doing to her body and how we're taking her child from her. And she's running after her child, and we're kidnapping, and we're abusing her body and torturing her. And so after that, like I connected with her like as a woman, and I'm like, I won't have anything to do with this. And so, you know, that made me, when I became vegan from that made me like a crazy vegan for like about 4 months. I was just trying to tell everybody like, it made me crazy. But what snapped me out of it was I felt like people stopped, like I was like alienating people. So I'm like, let me bring it in and figure out a better way to like share my message. But yeah, that's how I got into it.
So it's like a religious epiphany, an awakening, as you talk about it.
100%. Someone wanted me to know this information and help me, you know, make the connection, because I wasn't making it. You know, I had been vegetarian for like 8 years. I saw like a PETA video here and there, but nothing that really, like I saw a PETA video about chickens, and it said that chickens, you know, form their own little communities and things like that, where I'm like, well, I don't eat chicken. So, okay. But the cow experience like shifted my heart. And to me, that's how you become like an ethical vegan. It's like, you can go vegan for health, which is a great way in, like get your foot in the door, however you get your foot in the door. But don't stop there. Keep going. Keep learning about the benefits of being vegan. Keep learning about the animals, because once you make that connection with suffering, which that's one thing most of us all have in common. Everyone has experienced some form of suffering in another, whether it's verbal, physical, you know, psychological. Everyone's experienced some form of suffering. And if you've experienced suffering, you don't want anyone else to experience it. So, yeah, once you make that connection in that way, that makes you a vegan for life. Like I would never, ever go back to eating animals. I don't care if they said it was affecting my brain or, you know, I was getting weak or whatever. Like I just have to leave this planet, because like, I'm not going to go back to doing that. So.
How did it affect, aside from your crazy vegan time, how is it affected, or has it affected your view and relationships with humans?
Yeah, I mean,
you've been involved in, you know, other human-based movements. And so did this experience affect it?
Being the vegan movement is the first movement I've ever been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So prior to being vegan, I never got involved. I might donate or click on something or watch it and connect with it, but I never like actually was a boots on the ground person. So going vegan was actually my introduction into getting involved into other movements and seeing how things are ran and things like that. So that this really was my very first movement. But yeah, it affected me in a way. I would say it did make me more judgmental. In the beginning, I was quite judgmental, and I ended up having an experience where I got hired by Vegan Outreach to go on tour. Me and another young lady, we went to the South to some historically Black colleges and universities to give out leaflets and talk to people about going vegan. And we ended up in a town in Louisiana, a rural part of Louisiana, and we stopped at a Taco Bell. We go inside and I'm like, yeah, I'll take this type of taco, no cheese, no sour cream, no this. And she's like, none of this. Like, you know, she's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I would like it to be completely vegan. And she's like, what did you say? I was like, I would like it to be completely vegan. And she's like, what is that? And I'm thinking she just didn't hear me. I was like, vegan, VEGAN. And she was like, what is that? And I was like, you've never heard of the word vegan? And she's like, no, what is that? And I was just like, I almost went into like a pulmonary, like, I'm like, she never heard of the word vegan. And so I explained to her what it was. And so she went back to like the people that were making the food, and she like kind of whispered to them, and they were all looking over at me. And then a couple of them were giggling. And I'm just like, wow, you know, it's like a really odd experience. But what it did for me was it took my judgment, helped me with my judgment, because I'm like, you know what? I'm in LA where I can get vegan food by just snapping my finger. I can just order it and I can get any type of vegan food, you know, any food veganized that I want. And I'm assuming that everybody knows what this is. Everybody's had the conversation. Everybody's thought about it, thinking about it. They just don't want to do it, or they just don't, you know, not paying attention. And so once I came across someone that didn't even know what the word meant, I'm like, I need to start speaking to people from the level that they're at, not from the level that I've evolved into. Because when you talk to people from where you've evolved into, that's like, you know, you talking to me about division and, you know, multiplication, and I'm beyond trigonometry. It's going to be, you know what I mean? Or vice versa. It's not going to make sense. So it really helped me shape the way I communicate with people and talk to people. And it took the judgment out. It also added the empathy that I needed, because without empathy, when you're having these conversations, sometimes you want to win. You want to win the conversation. You want to let the person know you need to know this is cruel, this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. And the person is bantering back and forth and you just really want to win. But when you talk to people from where they are, you understand that they're victims just as much as the animals are. Because like I said, again, we've been born into a society that literally is programming us constantly with ads, advertisements, you know, even in the music and art, making you think that it's normal to eat another individual. And so, and in our society, you know, we constantly are fighting the red, the blue, the Dems, the Repubs, the left, the right, all these things. And really, none of that stuff is even real.
Now, did that lead you to so why did you establish Vegans of LA?
So Vegans of LA, I established because I had started doing meetups. And so when I created Vegans of LA, I was not vegan. I was vegetarian, but I didn't think that vegetarians of LA sound good. I'm like, that doesn't sound too good. And it's a long word. And I'm like, I said, people probably will want to hang out more with vegans than they would with vegetarians. Vegans are probably cooler than vegetarians. So I was trying to in my mind psychologically determine what made sense. So I was like, okay, Vegans of LA it is. And it was just, I started doing meetups because I was new to Los Angeles, and there was a suggestion from a friend. They were like, hey, you know, get your little hobby or something to do. And so I started doing that, and the meetups were like fun, and I was meeting some really great people. And then people were like, oh, how long you been vegan? I'm like, no, I'm not vegan, I'm vegetarian. And they'd be like, oh, you're vegetarian? Like, do you know what milk, you know? And I'm just thinking, you guys are kind of extreme, relax, calm down, milk and cheese is okay. And but luckily I ran into people that were gentle with me and that weren't like really harsh or anything like that. Like they kind of, you know, try to tell me, but you know, they saw the resistance and kind of like left me alone. And which is good, because I think if I would have came across like the harsh resistance, I would have probably not wanted to be a part of the community. So yeah, that was my way. So what happened was I started the page not knowing, I was so speciesist, especially with like words, and I had no idea what certain things meant. So I would be posting things and people would be like, oh my God, take that down. What are you like? I was just making all types of mistakes. I'm like, golly, people are so fragile. Geez, you know? And so I started posting articles, and what happened, and I think I probably had like maybe 1,500 followers, and my followers were all vegan, and you know,
were they mainly white or?
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Like predominantly. And I ended up posting a video because I couldn't find Black vegans. Like I'm like, where are the Black vegans? Like I did not know any in LA. I would see a couple on social media that were somewhere far away, but I didn't know any personally. And so I ended up posting a video by Jasmine Lavia, who created the documentary Visible Vegan. And it's a documentary about Black veganism. And so when I posted the documentary, the next day I woke up and had all these notifications on my phone. I went from like 1,500 followers to like 8,000 overnight. And it was all Black people. I'm like, yes, this is where you've been. You guys just didn't like my content. Okay. And so I think I went from like, I think within a week I had like 30,000 followers, and then it just started growing. And I found my niche. And so I started researching more Black vegans, going on YouTube, looking up people and things like that. And so that's how that page started to evolve.
So how did that affect you personally? In other words, that you were with predominantly white in that, and then you had the simultaneous, and did that make a shift as well for you internally and psychologically?
It did, because I felt like, oh God, I'm not alone. And then, you know, I would share articles, and it was also kind of like it became a little bit of a mental experiment in a way, because I would post things about animals and I would find that people, so I saw two different things. I would find that with white people, it was always animals, 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 period. And then when I would post things about animals, Black people would be like, the kindness wasn't there at the time. It just kind of seemed like it was just really about health, because what the health was also coming out at that time as well. So that also helped my page grow followers. So people that were Black were going vegan because of what they saw and what the health. Mm-hmm. So it was like, you know, people cared about their health, but it's still, the connection really wasn't being made at that time about the animals. So it was just like, oh God, I got some work to do, you know, on this page with helping make the shift to help people. So this is it. And I still kind of see this a little bit. The gap is closed in with white vegans. I found that they needed to expand their capacity to love to include Black people in their desire for liberation and freedom and ending suffering. And then with Black people, I found that they also needed to expand their capacity to love, to include animals and other sentient beings. This just doesn't have to be about yourself. So I find that, you know, each group has this particular gap to where it's like, we care about Black people, we care about animals, but to see the two merge was really difficult.
Did you ever encounter, or have you ever encountered kind of the cultural heritage of
well, I'll just tell a personal experience that I worked in the government, and there was this program that came out for education for diversity, and they were trying to recruit largely Black students to go into in that ecology and things like that. And my colleague who was Black, who grew up in the South, he says, well, we have this real prejudice in the sense of, we were indentured, and that the agriculture was associated with slavery and oppression. And so, I mean, this is kind of in the Pleistocene. This is like 20 some years ago. Yeah. So it may have changed, but for him, he said, I mean, even though he himself had gone in that route, he said, it's a real obstacle, sort of a psychocultural kind of obstacle. Are you encountering that in conversations?
I am. I try not to let it anymore be an excuse because it keeps it going. But yeah, I do encounter people because one of the issues that we still have here, especially in LA, is that it's still very much a white movement. Mm-hmm. I mean, predominantly, there's literally like 3 of us that they call on when they need a speaker or something like that to make it diverse. Literally there's like a handful of us because there's a lot of Black people that are plant-based or vegan, but not by the definition of incorporating animals and not wearing leather and, items that are cruelty-free and things like that. So it's a huge issue. But one of the reasons, like when I do talk to other Black vegans, they don't want to get involved. One, they feel like white people have kind of co-opted veganism in a sense and made it theirs. When, over time, Black people or people from Africa have been known to eat this way, for centuries. Is nothing really, truly, is really nothing new to us. We're just being reintroduced back into it, being reminded of what that is. Also in the way that a lot of the things are organized and the way that they're led. But again, for me personally, I'm trying not to, because I've been in this space of kind of being resistant and having the love-hate relationship. I'm kind of tired of being in that space, and I'm ready to just kind of like push forward. Even though I do get my moments to where I do feel a little bit of resentment, and I get a little bit stagnated. I'm kind of coming out of some stagnation right now, but I feel like I don't want to keep using the past as an excuse to not move forward and just push through this thing and help liberate the whole planet, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a really important point because so much of our sense of stability, our sense of security comes from identity.
Yes.
And that identity is, no man or woman is an island, it is socially and culturally based. And so in a sense, it's a huge step of vulnerability.
Yes.
And disidentification. And in particular, where like you're looking at the Black movement, where it's important, there was that discussion, Black Lives Matter. And there was some, when I say discussion, I just see stuff, all lives matter, and the tension that brought up, you know what I mean? That, yes, all lives matter, but at the same time, it was sort of, denatured the point of Black Lives Matter. So there are those intrinsic kinds of challenges and difficulties. And like I said, psychologically making oneself vulnerable, not wanting to give up something that has been gained,
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And because, like even with the All Lives Matter, like I found myself having to move on from quite a few friendships from people that were vegan that were doing that. And, I would say, hey, that we know that all lives matter. All lives do matter. You're 100% right. This particular phrase is being used because nope, all lives matter because blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, for people to take the time out of their life to oppose you pushing for your own liberation and being so blind to that. And, you know, that's a scary thing, because some of these people were people that I've like hung out with and spent time with, and to know that this is how they were thinking all along. And yeah, this year has been a purge where whatever's in is coming out. Mm-hmm. And it's happened with me because I'm, you know, someone that kind of, just for the sake of survival, will suppress and numb and just let stuff go so I can push through the day. And I found myself deciding that I didn't want to do that anymore. After George Floyd, it brought up so much pain and anger, and all the stuff that was still in me, I didn't even know was like still residing in me, bubbled and started coming out. And that actually happened with a lot of Black people. That's why you saw, like, you know, a lot of riots and protests going on, and Black people were like, oh, well, like, hey, what do you, when you shake a can and you keep shaking it, you know, and you don't let it express itself, this is what happens. You know, it's like an explosion. So this year has been an eye opener, and I feel like I've been doing really good with allowing myself to express and not suppress and say how I feel. And when there's something I experience that is racist, I speak up about it. I don't let it go just for the sake of allowing myself to not have to feel or to have to, you know, get upset. So I'm also going through an awakening as well, and learning how to align with my own community. And so now, like, I'm involved with Black Lives Matter, and I'm a member of that. And we go to, I've only gone to like one like action, but once a month, Vegan Outreach supplies. We as support, we provide groceries, plant-based groceries, like in the form of like fresh organic produce, vegan hot food. And this has been such a healing. It's been very healing for me to be involved in this, and to, without being preachy, sharing this delicious type of food. We've been doing it now for about 5 months. And they told me that I'm batting 100 with the vegan food that I've brought to the meetings. We usually give about like 200 people food, like hot food, and about 100 something bags of groceries. And so, like, you know, last month we did, we had someone from Vegan or Nah, she brought out vegan chicken sandwiches, which were made from fried oyster mushrooms. And then she did walnut meat tacos and fresh peeled potatoes and a agave juice. And they were just like, this tastes like fried chicken. They're like, we didn't know mushrooms could taste like this. So, you know, we'll introduce different types of foods, and without there being a condition, because sometimes it's good to just give and allow people to experience something without putting a condition on it. Well, we'll give you this, but you're going to have to go through 1 hour of listening to me talk to you, you know, about this. Now that is coming at some point, but right now it's just about giving, and, you know, they're doing things to help change the planet and liberate, you know, people of color and change legislation and things like that. So this is also a form of appreciation for the work that they're doing.
So who are these people that you're giving the food to?
Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
So this is the Los Angeles chapter of Black Lives Matter. So
now you're I think it's just started, but you're going to be, you know, beginning a podcast on Vegans for Life. What is it? Vegans Black Lives Matter?
Vegans for Black Lives Matter. Yeah, it's going to start next year.
So why are you doing that? And what is that? What do you vision for that?
So I'm doing that because there's so many conversations that, like, in the group, I'm learning what people don't know. And then there's also conversations that people want to have. And the podcast will allow me to use that platform to be really honest and really express, and also to talk to people that are doing some really amazing things in in the world, in the Black community. There's women that I want to interview who literally are out there, you know, risking their own freedoms to liberate animals, liberate people. So there's so many people. Like there's a gentleman, his name is Mike Africa. He's part of the MOVE organization. He's vegan. He was born as a vegan, and his family got bombed because they were all naturalists. So they believed back in the 60s in animal liberation. A community of Black people. They were, I guess you could say, anti-government, but what it is they believed in growing their own food. They believed in not harming anyone. They believed in the preservation of the environment. And that message was getting too popular. And as we do on this planet, anyone that is helping to awaken the masses, we kill them. Mm-hmm. And so they actually bombed and killed most of his family. His parents lived, but he was born in prison, and his parents were in prison for 40 years, and he helped get them released 2 years ago. Story is amazing. So it's stories like this, people like that I want to interview and talk about, because, you know, the mainstream movement may not necessarily know about the individual. And there's others. I met a gentleman the other day. He was born vegan, and he has an amazing story. I met another gentleman in the Bay Area. He went vegan in jail, and he had an epiphany about animals and liberation and things like that. So it's like, you know, there's some amazing stories out there that need to be told. And I want to help do it.
Where was Mike Africa? What state did it happen in?
He's from Philadelphia. So if you look up MOVE, if you put in Mike Africa, just Google, you'll see his whole story. He actually has a documentary on HBO that's being released on Tuesday. So there's an
fantastic.
HBO. Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so individuals like that, like you said, born vegan. In other words, their fundamental orientation, let's see if we can put this right, their fundamental orientation toward life, and therefore their experience of life. In other words, they may have gone through similar kinds of things from the collective, but because of their different fundamental orientation, their view of even Black Lives Matter and you know what I mean, the human situation, how is that? I mean, I don't want to say different, but you know, it seems like
it's broader. It's broader.
Yeah.
When you have a life like that, you're not going to see the world the way the average person sees the world. Even someone that's somewhat enlightened, you're going to still see the world in a broader view, because your capacity to see things and even catch the nuances of how this system operates. You know, he probably had an awareness of how this system operated probably as a teenager, where some of us still don't get it. We still think that
he saw. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, where some of us still think that the American dream is to get a job, get a house, get a car, you know, but where you have people like Mike Africa, and a lot of other enlightened beings on this planet, we realize that, you know, everything is free. The land, this earth is ours. It belongs to everyone. Water comes from the sky. It's free. Fruit grows from the trees. Free. You know, vegetables grow from the ground. They don't say, hey, this is going to be $5 when you get ready to go pick them. They're there for you to pick. But on this planet, we've commoditized everything, and we put conditions on it. And you can't travel here unless you have this document. You can't go here unless you pay for that. And so we've really put ourselves, this is a prison kind of in my own way I view it. You're kind of born into a prison. It looks like freedom or democracy if that's all you've ever been told and you haven't questioned it. But for me, this is not a democracy. I've always kind of felt like we live in a dictatorship, but it's not, maybe it's not North Korea. Maybe it's not, other parts of the world, but you can't run around here doing what you want. Like, you can't go where you want. You can't even grow food. You get caught growing too much food, you can go to jail. You can get
capturing water, or what they call water harvesting. Yeah. In fact, we had a local person here go to jail because he put a water harvester. I mean, it was just for his own use. It wasn't a commercial thing, and he was put in jail for that.
Yeah. And how do we take water and claim rights to it? Who are you to claim rights to what belongs to everyone? Mm-hmm. And so we keep letting this system run because we're allowing it. And that's a whole other conversation that
well, we'll do Gwenna part 2. I have one question for you. And it has to do with, white vegans who are participating. Do you see them participating in a way? Again, this is another kind of a thing, participating in Vegans Black Matter.
I do a little bit, like some of it.
I mean, how does that work? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of white people participate in the Black Lives Matter movement as allies. So I'm seeing that. As far as vegans, yeah, a little bit, like people participate in the conversations. But what I've told people in the beginning when I first created the group was that allyship isn't easy. Us coming together, because I didn't want to make this, people thought that the group was, first only for Black people. I'm like, no, it's for everybody. I want us to come in and have these hard conversations and talk about certain things. And what I found was people think that, often allyship means, oh, I love you, let's hug, and sorry for what happened, and that's it. And it's like, no, this is going to hurt. This is going to be painful because you're going to learn things that are probably embarrassing, that you feel embarrassed for about your culture. You're going to feel guilt. There's going to be conversations where someone is going to correct you or tell you that they don't like how you presented something, mm-hmm. and your feelings are going to get hurt. And what happens often is people get their feelings hurt one time and they leave the group, or they'll say, oh, you guys are racist. And it's like, no, you got to be able to withstand some of the hard conversations and sit with a little bit of being uncomfortable, because that's something we know how to do very well, is sit with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So it's been a real learning lesson for everybody. And sometimes too, it's a lot of like what I call kind of like performative allyship, which I heard somebody talk about this in the beginning and I thought it was kind of harsh, but I'm like, yeah, it is kind of performative, because people will slip off and not be interested anymore because it's not, the latest in the news, or it's not what's happening right now. So I still find that there's still a lot of work to be done, but that is not up to me. I've had to release myself from that responsibility. That's up to the individual to do that work, and do that work on themselves, and work on their own fragility and their own guilt and their own sadness. Because in the beginning, I was taking some of that energy on, mm-hmm. and I'm very empathic. And so I was reading a lot of the comments and people expressing how guilty they were and how ashamed they were to be white and how this and how that. And a lot of it felt very sincere. And it made me just kind of want to rescue folks. And after a while, it was just like really affecting me physically. So I had to learn how to back off from that so that I can function and do what I came to this planet to do. So that's why I say it's up to the individual to do that work. And reading a book, Robin DiAngelo, that's a great start, but that's not the cure. Like, this is going to be ongoing work for the rest of your life, because you all have been programmed to be this way. And just like being vegan, it's not just a one-time, okay, I'm vegan now. Like, you still have to unlearn so many different things. And there's no quick fix. You just have to keep doing the work until the day you die.
Thank you. Well, I could keep asking questions, but I'm getting empathic signals that I should shut up and give other people a chance to ask some questions. Thank you.
Telepathy over there, some telepathic.
Yeah.
I promise I didn't write anything in the chat box. Thank you both for a wonderful interview. And just before we end the recording and go into the Q&A, I just wanted to do a quick plug for next month's Living One webinar. So we'll be joined by James Frieden on January 3rd. So I hope you all can make it. So with that, I will end the recording.